it was a
Subscribe to Need to Know for the CEO podcast, and you will get to listen to and be inspired by other CEOs as they share their experiences and best practices. You'll also get to listen to subject matter experts who will brief you on what they think you need to know to do your job more effectively. The experts will occasionally include Ian and I, who will do episodes on topics like creating a winning strategy, OKR best practices, maturing metric capabilities, and building a high-performance culture, and other business news-related topics. Enjoy the show.
We both saw the Jensen Huang NVIDIA co-founder on LinkedIn. We happened to see the same post where he's doing an interview where he basically says that the reports that he manages, he doesn't want to do one-on-ones with. He doesn't believe in them for various reasons. So we thought today, as meetings, one-on-ones, and how they're running companies forms part of our training, in particular as it pertains to OKRs, that we'd just have a fireside chat today and go through it and what you thought.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that more than most posts I've seen recently, there was a lot of debate, discussion, different opinions on this, and clearly an incredibly successful guy. So his opinion matters.
Sort of looking at his profile after I saw that, just to try and learn a bit more. So he sort of co-founded NVIDIA in '93 when he was 30, so pretty young. And it's worth 3 trillion is what the company's worth. And that makes him one of the richest men in the world. So obviously we should need to sort of take his opinion not lightly. So we're going to go listen to what he says. So what was your initial takeout on his kind of belief that one-on-ones weren't useful for him anyway?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in the importance of context, really, in giving advice. And I have to kind of look at Jensen's his context. Where's he come from, and how did he get where he is? So he co-founded NVIDIA in '93, and he's built this incredible organization. Not single-handedly, of course. And it's interesting because I think the person interviewing him is one of the founders of Stripe, Patrick Collison, and he says, okay, no one-to-ones is interesting, but having 50 direct reports, he said, is that right?
Yeah, was it 50 or 60? It was a lot of direct reports, more so than the average sort of team size is 7 that they say manage. He's obviously up in the 50s, 60s. Which is a big number.
Yeah, and I remember having 14 at one point and thinking, well, this is way too many. I need to kind of resolve this. And so he's someone who's bought a $3 trillion organization, and he's done that by creating an organization in his own image, was my thinking. So is his context the same as everyone else's? Patrick asked him, this goes against conventional wisdom or conventional best practice, and he replied, well, this is absolutely definitely best practice, I'm sure. What's unsaid there is best practice for NVIDIA. And what do you think? How would you see that sits somewhere outside of NVIDIA?
So what made me think, because it's actually obviously a sensible point, which is if you're giving someone direct feedback in the moment and they're receiving that in a very public way in front of everybody, they are benefiting from that feedback as well, and they're finding that as a learning moment in there, and that's true, obviously true. You can learn from other people's mistakes as well as successes. So you can't argue with that. But at the same time, you've got to think about the individuals. Would you want that level of scrutiny in front of everybody else? How would that make you feel? And is that how you want to be treated in front of people? How also, what kind of comments is he provided? How sensitive is that information? How personal is that? How does that make you feel? And I think you've got to be a certain type of individual, and maybe the top 50 people around him are certain types of individual where that has been normalized. They all feel safe in their role. They all actually do truly benefit from that. But in terms of sort of, let's say, smaller, more normal companies with kind of traditional teams, I'm not sure how the average employee in the average company would deal with being called out like that.
Yeah, I had the same thing really, and he's got these 50 or 60 direct reports. He's one of the most well-known CEOs in the world, one of the most successful. He's probably handpicking the best of the best. These are elite people who not only at the top of their game technically, they're going to meet a profile that he has for the kind of resilience, I guess, of someone he expects to be a direct report with CEO at NVIDIA. So, I don't know about you, but when I've been a leader, you're dealing with a whole range of diverse people who have different needs, I found, and some have more, and not just at any one time. People are more resilient than at other times. I think generally when you're giving feedback, one of the first things I think about is the need for empathy, and how he manages to be empathetic in every situation and give quality feedback in front of 49 other people. I struggle to see how that's really possible.
This might be perception and might be unfair, but it felt in the way that he was talking that those conversations might have been very one way as well. It felt like he was on broadcast mode, not on listen mode. And if you look at best practices for one-on-ones, it's really the platform for your report to talk to you about their goals, where they are, their priorities, the things that are holding them back or acting as blockers, and for you to coach, support, enable as much as possible. And it's their conversation as opposed to your conversation.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I mean, I think of my own needs as reporting to people, and in a sense, your line manager you're in a partnership, but is also the person you go to help you develop, to help you work through challenges, so you can progress on things week by week. There's a part of that leadership role which is a coach, and you can't coach someone in front of 49 other people. It's just to me, it just doesn't seem realistic.
So maybe that's the key difference here. That if one-on-ones are coaching, mentoring, alignment moments where listening and empathy are kind of the skills that you need to index highly on. This doesn't feel like that environment, and maybe we're not comparing an apple with an apple here. We've called it a one-on-one in the interview, and we're kind of applying a one-on-one best practice filter against it. But I don't think, in the traditional sense, that's what's really going on at NVIDIA.
No, definitely not. I think I really discourage one-on-ones. I mean, the interesting thing is that Patrick asked him, do your direct reports do one-on-ones with their direct reports? And he clearly doesn't like the idea. And I mean, we should also touch on some of the, all the benefits of his approach. And they have got this thing that everybody is on the same page. There's this, I'm sure you've been in large, complex organizations where you're in a meeting and people are different, bringing in different interpretations of what the CEO or a senior leader wants, and it's I think his comments like, Jensen wants us to do this. So there's that benefit, and this idea of everyone on the same hymn sheet, and to some degree, I think the idea of learning from each other's mistakes is good, but it depends what kind of mistake it is. If it's something that's going to deeply embarrass someone, I'd rather learn that lesson on my own personally. Maybe that's just me.
And there's lots of rabbit holes to go down here. I mean, the terms that are springing to mind are things like psychological safety, that ability to speak up, talk openly, bring your own sort of views and opinions to the forum, be heard, and obviously the ability to make mistakes, amongst other traits of psychologically safe teams. It would appear, if that's the way the teams are able to sort of talk freely and openly in that kind of big forum, that's obviously present, which, you know, is a trait of a high performing team. So that's great. So culturally, they feel strong. I wonder how they deal with the learning and development and the particular needs of the individual, from a human resource, from a career development, from a individual perspective, even down to emotional well-being. At the individual level, if they don't give their managers the chance to develop these relationships with people on an individual as well as a team level.
Yeah, absolutely. You can imagine all kinds of scenarios. You know, you come into a meeting, you've got some crisis at home, you're tired, you haven't slept as well as you want, and your CEO is telling you, giving you some very direct feedback.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that's likely to be a very psychologically safe situation for me.
Yeah.
And I harking also back to how much feedback is there going in the other direction? You know, how often are people saying, well, you know, I don't think your behavior is useful, or I think you've made a mistake there. You know, does everyone else, is that two-way street really open? I don't know.
If I just think about some of the consulting and training we're doing at the moment, we are helping managers manage their teams better, and sometimes they have to deal with particularly difficult subjects, and you and I are not beyond even scratching our own heads sometimes, which is, you know, this is a very nuanced situation where this particular report is presenting the leadership team with a particular problem, and the behavior is undesirable, or it's something that's out of whack for the culture and values that they're trying to build. And the examples that I'm thinking of in my head, I'm pretty sure it would be inappropriate to bring that up in a team situation. However, you would, you know, you might like other people to learn that, because it actually would be quite humiliating.
Yeah, and absolutely. And we, you know, when we give feedback, I think often the first part of giving feedback is to understand the context a bit more. You don't necessarily head in with, you know, that was wrong, you shouldn't have said that, you shouldn't have done that. The first part is asking, okay, what were you thinking? You know, what was behind that?
Yeah.
And you can't do that in front of 50 people. I think that's, or even in front of 10 people, I would argue. So yeah, I think if all of these direct reports are incredibly mature people who have this joint psychological safety among them, who have very little development needs, I can see how it works. And let's face it, you know, they're an incredibly successful company. You've got Larry Ellison and Elon Musk begging him to supply chips for some of their endeavors. You can't deny the success. I think what you've got to look at is, how do you apply that into a different context? It's like one of the ones we hear a lot about is the Spotify model, which, depending on who you listen to, never really existed like it was, or was changed 3 weeks after it was written. You can't then just go and apply that in a different context, because these things don't happen in isolation. So and I see some people saying he's the best, we should all jump on this bandwagon and follow him as a leader. Yeah, great. If you become the CEO of NVIDIA, it's probably going to work, and you've got his personality. Perfect. Yeah.
Back to your point about context being everything. So I think the reason why, you know, this is interesting as well is, obviously, meetings is a big topic in every company. Generally, people spend too much time in meetings. Meeting best practices, policies are not often even created or communicated. So, you know, diaries are full for good and bad reasons. That takes away from productivity time. often can be very frustrating if you're in a bad meeting too. So you've got the team meeting kind of dynamic, which is obviously something we care a lot about. You've got the one-on-ones, you've got the asynchronous updates, you've got the kind of the whole personal development and performance management aspect to this. So it is nuanced. And I think it depends on where you are in the org, what type of team you've got, what type of, where your setup, whether you're kind of on premise or distributed or time zones. And I think, you've got to take each situation individually. You've got to find out what works for you. But I think the general goal of, we have a job to do as leaders. We have to deliver our strategy. We have to deliver our goals. We have to develop a culture. We have to support our people. We have to make sure they're learning and developing at the optimal rate. Whether it's team meetings, one-on-ones, or whatever the kind of forum is, these are just tools to use in the appropriate way at the appropriate time for your business stage and situation. And I think applying them appropriately is probably where these kind of blanket statements are not useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I like to think about what are the principles of what we're doing here. And you may talk about things like we want to coach people, we want people to develop, we want them to grow. You may also say that we want to use empathy, and we want to be mindful of the human behind this.
Yeah.
And I think if you take those things into account, you then need to build the one-to-one cadence or not. The meeting approach you want, it's about meeting your needs and your values. Ultimately, what are they? And they're probably not the same as his, and that's not a criticism of his values. Yours going to be different.
So perhaps we'll do a future deep dive into some sort of meeting best practices, one-on-one best practices as we see them. Of course, they're there to be adapted to the individual situation. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I've scratched the NVIDIA itch today.
Yeah, interesting topic, and I'm sure this one's going to bounce around for a while. But yeah, good to chat about it, and dig a bit deeper into it.